Thank you, Tim, and good morning, everybody. It is my pleasure to join you for this year's ENCA Online Event. And I'm going to be talking about empowering young voices and really creating space, power, and opportunity for them to thrive. As Tim said, my name is Simon Stones. I am the chair of the Power Committee. I am a previous ENCA board member and have been involved in the space of rheumatology patient advocacy for around 13 years, starting out as a young person with no experience of research, and now being in the position of leading the ULAB Power Committee, with an amazing group of volunteers across Europe and beyond who are all working towards that shared goal of improving the lives of all people living with rheumatic and musculoskeletal diseases. And really, young people with RMDs have the power to shape their future if they're given the choice, if they are trusted, if they are empowered, and if they had the space to do that. But we know that is a constant challenge for young people, really fitting into a space which has been dominated by adults with RMDs. But they have a really important voice, and it's something that we all really need to do to make sure that they have that space to feel included, where their power is really transferred to them so that they can shape what's really going to matter to them, because at the end of the day, they will be living with these conditions in the future. And if we don't set up for that success now, then we're going to be facing challenges in the future. And so, why are young voices important? And hopefully, some of these points won't be a shock to people, but really, it's about bringing fresh perspectives and innovation. Times are changing, even as each year passes by. There's lots of change, whether that's geopolitical, whether that's health and medicine related. Things are changing. So we need to bring in those fresh perspectives to make sure that the services, the support, and the treatments that we deliver for young people are fit for purpose. You also bring in this authentic lived experience. And, you know, as the younger you are, the more fresh and more real those experiences are. And it's really important to capture those often unfiltered experiences. And there's no cut off for when's the appropriate time to involve young people, because every single child and young person has a voice, and that voice needs to be heard regardless of their age. I'm a big believer in terms of this long-term investment in future leaders. That's certainly the opportunity that I was provided with as a young person, and now I see it as more part of my duty to make sure that we invest in our future leaders, almost at succession planning for our organisations, so that we equip our young people with the skills, the networks, and the confidence to be able to lead our organisations into the future. And then that really helps to bridge this generational gap. And, we often assume young people versus older people, but actually, even between myself and the younger people coming through, there is a generational gap between us millennials, and I certainly cling on to that millennial badge, to compared to our Gen Z, Gen Alpha. Things are changing, and we need to be mindful of those important facts. But too often, young people aren't heard. And this is certainly my experience when I got involved in research and in advocacy when I was 18. And believe it or not, I hadn't met another young person before I was 18 years of age living with an RMD. And obviously, I grew up in the era when the internet was, makes me feel very old. But when the internet wasn't widely available, I was 13, 14 years of age before I had the internet. And social media was not as such a huge part of our lives as it wasn't at the time. So there was an isolation point of view. And when you was in the clinical environment, you'd be sat with lots of other young people with various different conditions. So it was really hard to know who has arthritis like me? Who can I speak to understand what it's like to live with these conditions? And like I said, it was only when I was 18 when I was able to do that. And so in that period before, I often felt invisible. Like, how could I use my experience to help other people, to learn from other people, to shape the future health and care, healthcare and research landscape? And it was very unclear. And obviously, in that time since then, I've met some incredible people. I've been able to learn, which I think is one of the biggest parts, to learn from other people, to listen to different experiences, to understand, from my perspective, how privileged we are in the UK, for example, to be able to have a national health service which suits through at the point of access, which other people don't necessarily have. And it's something which, when we're all involved in this space, it's common knowledge, but a lot of people don't understand that. And so actually sitting down with people and understanding those nuances and those differences can be really empowering. And it is over that time where being exposed to opportunities, being given the chance to speak up, really has empowered me. And I see that happening with other young people. When they're given the opportunity, they can be empowered. And for me, one of the biggest changing points was finding community. And that really changed everything. And we talk about peer support often in an academic sense when we see studies developing peer support platforms and modules and opportunities for young people to get together. And when I was younger, I often compared the peer support to seeing people all sat round in a circle with a cup of tea and a biscuit and talking about their pain and their symptoms and having a little bit of a moan, which we all love to do, right? But it isn't just about that. And from my experience, it isn't about that. It's about being and surrounding yourself with people who understand. And when I sit together with other people with RMDs, other young adults with RMDs and other conditions, we seldom talk about our aches and pains and the struggles that we're having because we all know that we understand what it's like. And for me, that's the invisible part of peer support, which can be the most powerful component. When you don't need to say, I need to have a little bit of extra time to wake up in the morning, or I need certain arrangements making to make my day-to-day life more convenient. Those are just assumed. And actually, then you come together with people who understand what it's like to live with your conditions and being surrounded by people who accept that and never challenge those questions that you have. And so that is, I think, a huge part of peer support. And it's something that I found enormously reassuring and supportive when I joined and was one of the founding members of Young PARE. And for people listening who are unfamiliar with PARE, PARE is the community of people living with RMDs in Europe and beyond. And it's one of the communities within EULAR, the European Alliance of Associations for Rheumatology. And really, EULAR represents the voice of all people living with RMDs and all those working in the space to improve the lives of people with RMDs. And going back 11 years, PARA had done a research project to really look at what some of the unmet needs were for people living with RMDs. And it was very clear that there was a lack of support for young adults in that 18 to 40 age group living with these conditions, bearing in mind that there were organisations like ENCA and some of the other paediatric and adolescent organisations supporting those under 18, but there was this gap in the 18 to 40 age bracket. And so that project led to the establishment of the Umpire to really give young adults, sort of during and post transition from paediatric to adult care, the opportunity to come together and make a difference. And that's what we did. And actually being part of this organization really gave me purpose to not only be surrounded by these individuals, these wonderful individuals, and some of them are on screen there, including our lovely late friend Dora. And you almost people said to me that when you join these organizations and these communities, these people become family, and I can fully testify to that notion that you become part of a global network of people who understand what it's like to live with our conditions, but importantly are all sharing that same vision for a life free from the constraints of these conditions. And so we've done some amazing things over the year. I think one of the highlights for me was our Change the Future conference, which we held in Belgium in 2016, where we brought together the Young Parry Committee and our wider network of young people to really share ideas, to come up with some new projects, to work with researchers. And I vividly remember having one particular researcher from Austria, Paul Studenik, and he had this idea based on our conversations around patient-reported outcome measures, and actually are they fit for purpose for young people? And we were sat round the table, and Paul was like, "This needs to be a research project. Shall we do it together?" And so we developed a proposal together, which was submitted to ULAR and consequently funded. And then we did that research together. And I think this is just another example of the evolving healthcare and research landscape, where healthcare professionals and researchers are wanting to work with us as experts and realizing that young people are also experts and have much to give. And really, it's this evolution, okay, from speaking up to shaping change, and how advocacy opportunities can grow if we give young people the chance. My experience has very much been started off with one commitment, which was based in the UK, supporting the research agenda for paediatric rheumatology. And in that, I got to meet incredible individuals, including researchers, academics, patient partners, parents, who gave me opportunities by saying, "Oh, I've got this really good research project or awareness campaign. I'd love to get you involved." And then that sparks off joining that project and then meeting other people which then sparks another project. So we really need to be actively thinking about how we can give those opportunities to young people and to a broader group of young people. It's really important to not just engage the same individuals, but to widen our network so we bring young people along with us on the journey. Learning is a big part of that experience and that building confidence for young people. That's certainly how I have learned and listen to other people, whether they be other young people, older people living with RMDs, parents and wider family members, as well as our academic and clinical colleagues. There's always an opportunity to learn and to know that we can always grow. For me, I think one of the most important parts of that evolution has been the mentors and the allies who have joined me on the way to make sure that I have a support network around me that works. And I'll always be indebted to many individuals, but I want to particularly call out a couple of people who, and I'm sure there will be somebody from Sharon's organisation on the call, but Sharon Douglas was one of the first people that I got in touch with when I joined the UK Paediatric Rheumatology Clinical Study Group. And Sharon led SNAC in Scotland, aimed at supporting young people and families with JIA and other conditions. And Sharon had been involved as a parent partner for a number of years and really helped me to understand what our role was. And there's lots of other people I can name, including Catherine Wright from Arthritis UK, and Jenny Preston, who was a patient and public involvement manager who helped to get me involved in these activities and to really broaden my horizons. And yeah, lots of other people I could name, and I'm sure you all know who you are. But our mentors and our allies are really important to make sure that young people feel supported on their journey as they get involved in speaking up for themselves and other people with RMDs. Collaboration is vital, and Christoph already alluded to this. And being in my role now as chair of the PARE committee, I think now more than ever we need to combine our forces together to really bring all of our expertise and look for those synergies where we can work together. And so I'm really proud that ENCA works closely with PARE, including having Anita representing ENCA on our PARE committee and working with the paediatric committee within ULAR to make sure that all voices are heard, whether they be young people, parents, grandparents, siblings, and wider support networks. We need to make sure that everybody is along on the journey with us. And then finally, growth. Growth never ends, and we always need to make sure that we equip young people with the ability to give feedback and receive feedback constructively because we all have capacity to learn and to grow. But what challenges still persist? And these are just some of the challenges that I see day to day when we think about involving children and young people in advocacy, in research, and in shaping future clinical care. And the questions are, are we afraid to give them control? What are the reasons behind that? Do we underestimate their insight? Do we even ask them what they need? And I think this last one is really, really important and is a call out for organizations. Do we make it too hard for them to say yes? I have many conversations with whether they be research organisations, pharmaceutical companies, and say, oh, we can't involve children and young people. But why? Okay, there are certain regulations which restrict involvement of under 18s, for example, in international congresses. But okay, if that's an issue and we can't do anything about it, how can we bring them into the conversation? Can we speak to them beforehand? Can we get them live linked via video? Can we have recorded testimonies? There are lots of opportunities, and it may be more difficult and it may require extra time and effort, but just because it does require that extra effort doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. So it's a point for us all to reflect and to take a step back and think, how can we involve young people in the work that we're doing? And the solution, with all of that combined, is creating space, power, and opportunity. So with space, making sure that they feel safe, included, and welcome from the outset and all the way through their journey, whatever that will be in terms of their involvement. Thinking about power and the power dynamics that exist, and really focusing on shared decision making and making sure that they have influence so that they feel that they can contribute. Because we know when they do feel empowered, then that reaps rewards because they feel that they can contribute and that their voices will not be lost in the conversation. And then opportunity. And that includes training, mentoring, and recognizing their contributions, whether that be having them on a panel, whether that means they're co-authoring publications, and also making sure that their time is reflected, and that could be financial as well, to make sure that we really reflect and recognize that expertise. And really, when we talk about empowerment, it's not just making a space available at the table for young people to join, but it's actually about redesigning that table altogether. Do we need to do things differently to make sure that young people can get involved? And so this is part of my personal commitment in my role to make sure that I can do what I can to make sure that children and young people and families have the opportunity to shape the future care and research landscape in rheumatology. And that's about amplifying the voice of young people, supporting them and ensuring that they have the opportunity to speak up, mentoring them as well so that they feel supported and included as they move forward in their journeys. Really trying to help create systems that sustain that youth involvement. So it's beyond one-off tokenistic involvements to a real meaningful program of involvement. And then really spotting those potentials in moments where others may overlook. And I feel like that's quite unique for me to be able to come into my role relatively young, to be thinking always from that young person perspective. And I think importantly, ensuring that they are connected with other people who have the expertise, the knowledge, and the know-how to support them in their journey. So some key messages for you to take away from today is to think about empowering, trusting, and investing in young people. We need to be listening to understand, not to respond, which is a quote I will always use. We need to share opportunities early so that they can get involved. We need to really value their contributions as equal. And for me, this is about being the person I once needed when I was a young person, aged 18, and making sure that the space is open and available for them. And really recognizing and amplifying their successes so that we can make sure that there is that continuous feedback loop and that they feel that their contributions are recognized and seen. So my key takeaway and call to action today is to really remind everybody that empowering young people is not an optional extra. It's about building a future that truly reflects their experiences. And in terms of the call to action, I want you to all think about, in every opportunity that crosses your path, to think, is there a young person who could be part of this? And then make the room for them to join and then invite them in and support them in that role. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Michael Pölzl. I'm a patient advocate from Austria. a quick introduction. I am an ENCA board member and also volunteer in various other organizations. I'm a software developer and a STEM teacher, but most of all, I'm a father to a daughter who has a rheumatic disease, who's 10-year old now, and she's doing really well. And this kind of got me very engaged in the whole patient advocacy area, and is my drive to participate in events like this and put my time towards volunteering for this great cause. Today, it's my pleasure to talk to you about sharing strengths and peer support, which I think is very, very important. It certainly was for us, for families, the parents, the patients themselves, the siblings, because it's really a very, very difficult journey. And to start this talk, I want to share with you a picture which I've taken on the exact day that our journey started. We were living in the beautiful country of Oman at that time, and I was away on a camping trip with some friends. It was a very beautiful day, and then my wife called me to say our daughter is not really well. She's in much pain, and I had to take her to hospital. And please, come and help us as soon as you can. And I remember driving down from this mountain for about 2 or 3 hours until I got to the hospital, and all the things that went through my head. And really, kind of that was the start for us as a family, as a parent, also for my daughter, of course, as a patient, on this journey where at the very start, you really have so much uncertainty, you have so much fear, there's a lot of confusion. Sometimes you try to reject everything. This first period is really, really difficult until you get to a point maybe where you have a diagnosis, or some people, for that takes a very long time to get to a diagnosis. That can also be a very, very difficult time, because on top of everything else, you don't really know what is wrong, and you can't actually start sort of the journey of becoming better. So that is a hugely, hugely difficult time, because you worry about the future so much, you worry about your child, and it's quite hard to convey how hard it is to worry for someone like your child, and not knowing exactly what is going on. Once you get to a diagnosis, things become slightly better because you have a bit more of an outlook. But at the very start, you have medical information, obviously from the doctors and the hospital. You go on the internet, and then you go from having too little information to really having massive information overload, and there's really no filter on the internet, so that can be very difficult to see what is applicable and what is not. And generally, you just lack perspective, outlook on life. What does it mean for the family, for the child? And that's a very difficult position to be in. So, of course, healthcare providers, hospitals and doctors, they can help and they can give information, but really what can provide most of the support is support groups, and that really was also the case for us. We were completely lost. We had a lot of information. We didn't really know what it meant for us for life. So our first call, living abroad, was to look into our own country. We found an organization called Räumerlis, which I'm volunteering for now. And we need about 30 minutes. We were on a telephone call with Karin, who's the leader of Räumerlis, and she talked to us. She gave us a bit of perspective. She said, I can't really give you much information, but I know someone probably who can. And she put us in touch with another family, with a girl with systemic lupus. And this is kind of how our journey into the whole thing started. And it gave us so much more perspective and outlook on life, and put us really onto a starting point where we can look forward into the future and be a bit more confident about it. So if you look at some of the challenges that families with in this situation have, or any kind of families really with any kind of chronic diseases, because it's not just the medical challenge. Of course, the medical challenge is very present. It's about medication. It's about hospital visits. It's about treatments. It's about, is it working? Is it not working? All the worry about kind of this and this, trying to convey all of this to your child, which is kind of difficult. The communication can be quite hard because the child doesn't really understand what is happening. And depending on the age, it's quite difficult to actually talk to and make them understand. On top of that, there is a lot of emotional stress, of course. For us, that was a very, very, probably the most difficult period in our lives so far. There can be isolation because although you have many friends around you, possibly, you're really quite alone in that situation. And I'm also thinking about some of our members who are single parents. I can imagine that that is hugely, hugely difficult, because at least in our family, we had two people sort of supporting each other, which was difficult enough because it was through Corona times also, where only one person would be admitted into the hospital at any one time. So even that could be quite isolating for us. And I can imagine that for some people, that must be a lot worse. And of course, there is lots of practical things. There's hospital visits, there is school, how to balance it. Sometimes schools are very supportive, sometimes schools are not supportive at all. There is childcare, there is full-time employment for some people, how to get time off, does it affect my job? So the challenges are really, really big also for siblings, for example, to care, also to put enough attention to a sibling is a very difficult task that we found. We try to give as much time as we could, but naturally that is quite difficult. So how can we get peer support into this? So the peer support really that we're talking about in this context is families, the patients, the parents supporting each other through their lived experience, and how can that work in practice? So first of all, understanding and empathy is key, I think, to put you into a situation where you can really be open for anything else. So you need to speak to someone who is in a similar situation, who can bring understanding towards you, because that also will build a lot of emotional resilience that you will need as parents, patients, siblings, to sort of get on top of this situation a bit and be able to move forward. We already talked about perspective. Just talking to someone who is in a similar situation, maybe 5 years ahead of you, with a child that is still going to school, still doing all the stuff with challenges, but still living a life. I think that is a perspective that is really, really important to see, because he can be very negative to start with, and he could think the worst all the time. So a bit of positive perspective can help to get you on a good path. Knowledge exchange is really, really present in our support group. Just yesterday, a couple who's joined our support group very recently, they've asked a very basic question. They have a 1-year-old who's been diagnosed with a rheumatic disease, and they were just asking the question of how can we tell if he's in pain or not, and how can we know that he's actually obviously he's not crying, but still he might be feeling pain all the time. So how do we know this? How can we, what are the signs for it? And there was some really good feedback from other parents to say, okay, you can look for this, this, and this. And sometimes people just say, sometimes you just don't know. It's just the reality of it. And just to have this backup to say, okay, sometimes you can't really control the situation so much, but it's okay. You do the best that you can. That can be quite liberating, I think, for many people. It certainly was for us. So when we talk about peer support, how can we achieve it? Simon was already talking about this in a fair bit of detail. It really starts with kind of one-on-one connections. And I think that works particularly well if you find someone that is in a similar situation that you can relate to, that you can speak to really well. If you find someone like that, that can be hugely, hugely improving your situation, because then you feel understood. You have someone that you can bounce ideas off, and it's just like a friendship really, on top of the peer support. And then we have support groups, of course. The support groups locally work really well because you can meet with other people. It's also important for the children to meet each other, to see, okay, there are other children out there with similar problems, with similar challenges, but we can still, go out and play and do our stuff, and it's possible to do so. I think that gives perspective to the children that is also much needed. Of course, now online communities are also very, very important. And this is very, very important for the more rarer diseases, or even diseases like systemic lupus in young children. For example, in Austria, it is very, very difficult to get in touch with other families, because we don't really have much lupus in Austria, and for young people, even less. So it's sometimes important to look outside the country and see what support is available. And in our case, for example, I managed to reach out to Lupus UK, who had a fantastic parent group that I was able to join. And that was also hugely helpful, because there was really some good knowledge and experience in there that I could draw on, or that we could draw on as a family. And of course, then patient organizations in the country have a very, very important role because they can support all this and they can facilitate all this and they can put people in touch with each other. And on top of that, obviously, go into other things like advocacy and education. And this is what Reumalis is doing. And obviously, ENCA with this online day-to-day also trying to pass on some of that knowledge, get some discussion going, get people in connection. So that's also very important. And I think often very overlooked is that this is really kind of a ripple effect. When you feel supported as a parent, when you're in a much better place, your mind is much better prepared to deal with challenges, to discuss with your healthcare teams, your doctors, to face challenges, schools, family, and friends. So really, if you empowered and you kind of take charge of this situation, you're in a much better place and the overall situation improves a lot. And once you get to that stage, you can also think about becoming a supporter yourselves, giving something back to others. And it's important also to mention here that it's not really important that we're experts. Sometimes it's just enough to be in a similar situation than someone else and just sharing your experience. So you don't need to have any great insights or medical knowledge. I think sometimes just being there and talking to people and sharing what you went through is enough for people to support each other. And then also, I think for our children, it's also very important to see that we collaborate, that we have empathy for each other, that we help each other in these difficult situations, because they need to take that forward into their adult life. And I think this is very important, and I'm sure that's also discussed a lot, but peer support also needs transition. So when we talk about transition into adult rheumatology, we also need to make sure that when the children grow up, their peer support network also transitions with them and they have something, because they become less reliant on their family. And of course, the family is always going to be there, and there's always something to fall back on. But when they get into their lives and when they grow up, I think it's very important for them to have peers in their own age, like Young Pare that Simon has been talking about, and many other organizations, of course, throughout Europe and the world do exactly that. But it's important to build that up so that when they get to that stage, it's not alien to them and they're much more likely to accept it. So I think that's very important. And then just to talk about organizations and networks, obviously we talked about the local support groups and the national organization who can have a bit of more of a strategy and offerings for the whole country, or even supporting local groups. That is important. And also international organizations like ENCA here. We're trying to build a strong network where people can come together, from patients to local support groups to national organizations, into ENCA or PARE that Simon was talking about, to keep these connections going, share our knowledge and experience. And I think that's also very, very important. And that's me really almost at the end of the talk. I want to leave you with a short video, which is peer support in action. It's something that we have done in Reumalis this year. It's called Cuddly Toy consultation that we do in combination, the kids, the parents, the doctors, everyone sort of working together to make an experience for the kids and helping each other to normalize this difficult situation that some of them are in. So if I just play that, I hope you can hear it. And then just finally, the call to action and a plea for help, really. So no one really should walk this road alone. I think that goes without saying. Please encourage families or even yourself to join organizations and support groups. As I said before, we don't need to be experts. We just need to be there for each other. I think that's very, very important. And obviously peer support, it turns isolation into community and fear into strength. That certainly was the case for us, and we benefited hugely for it. So please go out there and also share your experiences and help others. Thank you very much. That is my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
So yeah, my name is Natasha. I'm from Canada. I am a patient advocate and I live with a rheumatic disease. I was diagnosed at the age of 13 with juvenile idiopathic arthritis. And like many young people with chronic illness, I felt very alone and misunderstood. So at the age of 13 and being so young with arthritis, I think oftentimes we associate arthritis with old people, and that's not true. A lot of young people have it, and I've been able to meet so many young people that do have rheumatic disease all around the world. And for me, looking for peer support when I was growing up was really hard. I would search up online kids getting arthritis and trying to find peer support, and at that point, which was almost 10 years ago, I wasn't able to find anything. I would just find adults or parents talking about their kids and their journeys, but no kids talking for themselves. And so when I was 18, I decided to create my own community called Take a Pain Check. And at first it started as a podcast, so I would talk about different topics. I still do the podcast every single month. And now it's grown into a movement where we have over 50 volunteers participating and being involved. So this is some of our team. We have young people living with rheumatic diseases. We have allies, doctors, and just people who are really passionate about giving back to the community and creating a safe space for young people to share their stories and be empowered. So a little bit about our mission at Take a Pain Check. So like I mentioned, I've been using the word empower, but we do want to empower young people with rheumatic disease, but through education, advocacy, leadership, and peer support. The organization is youth-led and patient-run. And we want to amplify lived experiences and provide tools to help these youth be able to navigate their healthcare journey and create meaningful change within their community. And so, at least for me, I want to make sure that all these youth are supported. For me, it was really hard to find support and find other young people to talk to till a couple years into my journey. And so I want to be able to create that space where it's so easy. Someone's diagnosed, okay, peer support, here you go. You can talk to all these different organizations on how to get involved. And so that's one of our goals at Take a Pain Check, is to be able to provide that regardless of where you live. So I've had lots of people in our organization. We have members from Australia, the UK, the US, and regardless of where they live, I think we can still support each other, like this event and having people online. We can create peer support through that network. So at Take a Pain Check, we have a lot of different programs, and I'm going to talk about a few that really stand out for peer support and kind of my idea and vision through these programs. So we have a podcast, a blog, something called Joint Chat Room, which is our virtual support group, a backpack program where we give ergonomic backpacks to kids in Canada living with rheumatic disease, ages 13 to 17, with a bunch of tools inside. We have a Young Scholars program, which is a scholarship program for young adults that are entering post-secondary. We want to be able to support them through their education. We have Light Up Blue, which is a global awareness campaign for Word Day. And then we have some ambassador programs, a youth board, and healthcare related programs as well for doctors. So I want to talk a lot about the isolation crisis with young adults living with rheumatic disease and the critical gaps that we face. So 51% experience loneliness. I'm sure much more people experience loneliness. It's not just 51%, but doing research, we've been able to find that. 30% experience isolation. A lot of people feel different from their peers, and a lot of people feel criticized or not believed. And a lot of this data came from a report and a survey that another organization called the Canadian Arthritis Patient Alliance and Take a Pain Check created in 2022. And we had approximately 56 participants at that point, and 50% were in Canada, but we had the rest of the 50% from different countries. And we also had these patients report on different topics. And then we found out that the most areas of support that's needed or social support, healthcare, school and health, medication access cost, work health, and mental health. And a lot of people really need support around these topics, and one of them was social support, so I knew it was really important for us to do something about it. And that's just some of the data, not all of the data. We actually have a report that we'll be publishing soon that goes through recommendations that both of our organizations would give to other organizations on these different topics. But a main thing I want to talk about is the podcast and blog. So Take a Paycheck, we also do indirect peer support. So sometimes I find that patients like myself originally would not have wanted to talk to someone else living with a rheumatic disease. And I just want to listen to some other people on the internet and not have that direct conversation. And so being able to read blog posts or listen to podcasts have been super helpful for not only myself but others, because in a way that is peer support. You're getting peer support by listening to stories, by reading stories, and not having to, directly share your story, but, get empowered and inspired to then eventually be able to advocate for yourself or share your story. And so that's one way that we do peer support, is an indirect version. Another way is we've been able to create a book through our youth board. So anyone who is ages 16 to 29 can be involved with Take a Paycheck. And so we focus a lot on like teens and young adults. And really this book was created last year with a couple of different young adults living with different types of rheumatic diseases, and a couple of pages really focus on peer support, or specifically what to look for in a friend, what to look for in terms of when you want to meet others with rheumatic disease. And because that's really important, your peer support network is not only, your support group living with arthritis, but it's so many other people. It's people around you that may be allies. That's going to be your peer support group as well, or your peer support. And so what do you look for in a friend is really important to make those decisions in order for you to have a good, successful life living with your rheumatic disease. So we have different pages in this book, which you can find on our website. Like, just search up Take a Paycheck, and we have a section called the Youth Board. So we have a youth board every single year, and so patients can constantly get involved every year and create different resources. So last year they created this book. This kind of gives you a timeline of the different stages of life, and each person living with rheumatic disease wrote that specific timeline. Then our main program is Joint Chat Room. So we started this program in 2022. And at first, it was doing well. It was peak COVID online. Everyone wanted peer support because, we all wanted to talk to each other. We were very lonely living at home, and just being at home and not having that contact with other people. So Joint Chat Room is a virtual program hosted once a month. We've kind of done lots of different changes to it now. It's 6-month cohort. So every 6 months we have new patients getting involved. And really, you talk to new people living with a rheumatic disease every single month. Doesn't matter where you live, where you're from, as long as you live with a rheumatic disease or within the age range. We have different topics we talk about. It's like one month we talk about, for example, during the holiday season, how to navigate holidays with a rheumatic disease, or how to travel with a rheumatic disease, how to cope with, isolation or accommodations, things like that. So every topic is different, and every month a new person with a rheumatic disease will host this session. And this is a great way for people to talk to each other with not much commitment. It's just once a month for 1 hour. You have the schedule in advance. And then patients are able to put that in their calendar, because I know, like myself, our schedules are super busy as being youth and young adults. So having that schedule beforehand really allows us to then put that in our calendar, make sure we're available, and we can also do other things and then also get that peer support that we might need. So at first, that wasn't what we were doing. We were posting sessions every single month, and we would have different types of engagement. But now we've created a more meaningful, tight community where these people that are engaged for 6 months, and they get to know each other. And then we have a Discord platform where they get to chat afterwards with their respective peers. So this is sort of how Joint Chat Room works. So I'll briefly go through it. We have some icebreakers, ambassadors share their stories, we have interactive activities, we have games, we also have guided discussions as well. And these are some of our results from our first cohort of our new pilot program. So everyone really, really enjoyed this program, which was amazing. We have some quotes on the screen as well. It was very validating and helped me felt heard. It was nice to meet others and not feel alone. I learned good ways to handle the pain, so lots of different things there. We also hosted an in-person event this year. This is our first in-person event called Unity Through Rheumatic Diseases. And event overview was in May. It had 150 people, including patients, caregivers, healthcare providers, and representatives and advocates. And really, we wanted to make sure that we talk about young adult related topics and have peer support in person, because sometimes, you can be on a Zoom call. We've been on Zoom calls for a really long time because of COVID, and I wanted to change something. I wanted to make sure that people can also meet in person and talk to each other. And it was really, really nice. So here are some photos on the screen, but also just attendee feedback. People really liked the sense of community that this in-person event had. They got to meet with others, share their experiences, connect with peers and experts, have this intimate, welcoming setting. We talked about different things like mental health, research, lived experience, transition from pediatric to adult rheumatology. There was a big, praise for speaker quality. We had occupational therapists, patients, healthcare providers, and then really a lot of these patients provided stories of hope, not feeling alone, and a lot of these personal stories resonated with attendees. So here are some quotes on the screen. But really, someone said, it was the first time I was around people who shared the same lived experience as me, and seeing that I wasn't alone opened my eyes a lot. Even from a rheumatologist perspective, your event makes me look forward to clinic next week. I will be a rheumatologist because of it. So there are a lot of people that were very supported by this event, and having this in-person peer support was really helpful. It was a full day event. Patients got to talk to each other, patients got to talk to doctors, and they got to hear from 4 different panels and of different variety of ages and rheumatic diseases and experiences. So these are just the people that support us and everything that we do, and we're really grateful for that, because I wouldn't be able to do what I do and have these people do what they do in our organization without the support of all these different organizations, whether it's collaborations or sponsorships. I also want to talk about Light It Blue. It's one of our big global campaigns that we do in support of Word Day. So for Word Day, as you know, it's World Young Rheumatic Disease Day, and it's on March 18th. And so we've been able to light up landmarks blue across the world to support this day. And so this is sort of another way to kind of get peer support. If you have other people that you want to go to these landmarks with, I think you can basically be able to network with them, talk to other people. We can also arrange for people to go to these landmarks. So you get to meet new people and find that community support, whether that's indirectly or directly. Other than that, these are some people, amazing people in our organization, who've been able to really show us from peer support. They joined Joint Chat Room 3 years ago, and they're now advocates in our community, and they've gone so far. And so it's really empowering and inspiring for me to see patients who've just started off with, I need support, I'm alone, I want to understand my rheumatic disease, to now be able to really be an advocate, raise awareness on social media, go to conferences. A lot of these young people are now speaking in conferences because of Take a Paycheck and other organizations. And so we're really grateful to be able to provide those opportunities to them. And I think peer support is so important because it allows you to feel empowered. It allows you to talk about your journey and then eventually take those next steps to then advocate for yourself in multiple different settings, which is what we're all about here. And these are our social medias. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed. Thank you.
To go to the Q&A. We don't have any questions yet in our Q&A part, so I have a few questions for you, and I want to start with Simon. How do you feel your patient experience has shaped the way you worked as a professional in the industry?
Great question, Tim. I think lots of people who will have grown up with a childhood onset RMD will have faced the constant challenges, constantly having to defend why we need extra support, always being a little bit uncertain about how people are going to react. Okay, these are common feelings which, still exist today, like constantly having to defend why we need extra support, right? So I think that's the way that I approach and the way that I talk to people, because lots of people are just unaware of the subconscious biases that exist within society. When the society is driven by an ableist agenda, it doesn't reflect the needs of people living with not just RMDs but all different chronic conditions. So it's constantly challenging the status quo and saying, have you thought about this? And so, as I work in the medical affairs industry now, that's something I speak to my clients and other contacts about is, have you stopped and asked what it's like? Do you start your conversations and it comes back to that point that I made earlier, listening to understand, not to respond. And that is how everybody should be approaching conversations. So we truly understand what are the unmet needs, and then we can drive forward an agenda with people on board that really addresses those concerns and those issues. Because otherwise, we're just going to go around in this constant circle of doing work, delivering, research, clinical care that really doesn't meet the needs of people. And when you do it in that co-produced way, you get better outcomes because you're really addressing what the real challenges are so that people can live a more fulfilling life. So it is constantly having to say that. And sometimes you do get a little bit frustrated because you're saying the same thing over and over again. But it is the hope that people listen, people stop, and then people change what they're doing to make sure that they are inclusive of those perspectives.
Yes, then we will move on to Natasha. Many parents, especially in the EU, where data regulations and privacy are high regulated, struggle with allowing their children into peer networks without explicit consent processes. Have you any ideas for how to allow children to participate without using social media, being able to remain anonymous, keep their data safe?
Yeah, so at Take a Pain Check, if you're under the age of 18, we have consent forms that your parents have to sign before you can get involved with our organization. And then we also have different opportunities. So some patients love posting on social media and they want to become advocates and raise awareness. And so that's something that they can definitely do and be involved with. Because I think a lot of patients deal with, isolation through humor and coping mechanisms through watching TikToks or Instagram reels. And so that's an option. But we do require parent consent forms. On the other hand, if they don't want to be involved in terms of like social media related stuff, we do have a youth board, and that's very hands off. Like I showed you, it's just creating resources. So that's another way that they can be involved and talk to other young people with rheumatic disease. And joint chat room as well. It's an opportunity for patients to have this safe space, and they just have to talk to each other. All of their kind of information stays private. They don't have to share what they can share what they want to share. So that's another way as well. And yeah, we are always open and happy to talk to parents who may have any concerns, but we do have consent forms and all of those things in place now. So it's definitely something that, we're aware of that, parents may be scared. And I think oftentimes, even when I was growing up, my mom would have been scared if I'm just, joining any group. So we definitely have those things in place.
Yes, and Michael, how do you market this support to families who may not be aware of your work?
That is a very difficult question, really, how to do it, because we found, certainly in my country, that the hospitals and the doctors sometimes are quite reluctant to give out information about support groups for whatever reason. I'm not sure. Maybe they don't really know us enough, or maybe they feel like they can't single out one over the other, etc. So I think often it's people find us. But that's not ideal because, as you say, that there might be people who don't reach out, or maybe not in a position to reach out, or might have trouble with language. We have a large migrant population, for example. It's very difficult for them to reach out to say, okay, what is there? And they might not actually feel that they can. So I think it's one of the important things that we need to do as organizations to actually sometimes go and make the first step, reach out, go somewhere maybe where you can meet these people. We have posters for the waiting rooms with QR codes, etc. So it is a very, very difficult thing to do, and it takes a lot of work. I think we're obviously on social media, we have a website, etc. But actually to reach these very, very few select people is really, really difficult, because you're not trying to reach the public, you're trying to reach a specific person in a very specific circumstance. So I think the more awareness you can create, the better. But if you have like a targeted thing where these people come together, like a rheumatic clinic, I think it's very important to start there. And then for us, it's really important to engage with the hospitals, to engage with the people there, the nurses and the doctors, to say, okay, this is us. Let them sort of know what we are about, and say, okay, we can really help these people. Like, please hand out a flyer, give them a QR code, get them to the website, or just give them a phone number and say to them, please just call us. We're there for you. Almost night and day, really. I mean, if you need us, we're there. So don't like breaking down these barriers, I think is very important, and it takes effort.
And Michael, I just wanted to jump in on that point because, and it just made me think of a really great example that I've seen here in the UK, from the National Rheumatoid Arthritis Society, NRAS, and that they've actually managed to implement a referral service. So the pediatric rheumatologist can do direct referral to the patient organization. And so that removes the need, because you know what it's like during that diagnosis process when you've got all these questions and you know it's a massive event, and it actually takes that responsibility away from the family. And so the patient organization then reaches out, well, this is making sure the consents are in place to say, here's our support and to walk through. So I'd love to see more of those examples where you then had this wraparound holistic service, which really integrates the capacity of your clinical environments and what the patient organizations are offering. So just thought I'd point that in there because I think it's a great model to work off.
It's a fantastic idea. If you can get to that stage, I think you're really winning. And there's another good example actually that just popped into my head from Belgium. They have the national organization have prepared these folders that the doctors can use to put in different information. So there is like a basic folder with some general information, and then depending on the condition of the child and the disease, they can fit in different information sheets and point to different organizations that are applicable to that particular child. And that's also this like targeted giving out of information is a fantastic idea. And then if you get everyone on board that's surrounding this, I think we're onto a winner.
Yes, nice how you say that. But for Natasha, and what is your best advice to other adolescents, patients who may be interested in creating a patient advocacy organization?
I would say it's definitely hard, but it's not impossible. I think first, at least for me, I didn't realize how big it would become so like quickly, and it just kind of caught up very quickly. I was 18 at that point, so I would definitely say take your time, get involved with other organizations, see what's missing there, and if there is a new idea that you might have, definitely get your resources and your mentors to help you create something that'll be able to be meaningful. Um, but I definitely say don't do it alone and try to get the support that you need. It's a challenge, I'd say. I wouldn't say it's easy, especially balancing like school and health commitments and stuff. But if it's something that you want to do, I would definitely support it. It's been amazing making my organization, and I don't regret it any day. I think it's definitely helped me and other people. And so whatever you do, just make sure you're very passionate about it, because I think regardless, it's going to be amazing. Just make sure to get your resources and your mentors to help you out throughout the way.
Yes, thank you so much, Simon. How do you feel your patient experience has shaped the way of your work as a professional in the industry? Of Sorry, I already did it. In your experience as patients, what do you feel has changed now in the use of young voice in patient research that may have shifted since you were a patient teen?
I mean, I think the first thing to say is you didn't see any kind of young person in any kind of advisory role. So I think that's changed, the visibility, and I think social media and much greater awareness has helped that. The dialogue has definitely changed from, and we still see those, I'm too young to have these conditions. We still see that narrative, but it's becoming less and less. More people are more open about sharing their experiences. And I think this comes not just with RMDs, but all other types of conditions. We get into the point where people feel much more open and able to talk about their experiences. So I think that's definitely a positive. And I know it's a big thing for people to do that, especially in the school environment when it can be really, really challenging to be, your true, authentic self when you could be judged. So I've got much admiration for children and young people who continue to do that. And I think seeing examples of young people leading, and Natasha's a fantastic example of, seeing how you've taken that idea and converted it into something for good is a real massive motivator for people, for young people coming through with these conditions to think, actually, I can use this negative experience to do good personally as well, but also to do good for the community. And so the more examples of that we see, I think the better. And it's just nice to see this evolution of the landscape and having more young people in roles. And as chair of the PARA committee, it's lovely to see that we've now had two former young PARA members who now have chaired the PARA committee, myself and previously Peter Boyd from Ireland. And we're seeing this shift of a much broader perspective of people being involved in making decisions, and that makes the community feel more heard, I feel, because you represent a wider body of people, and you're bringing in those new perspectives. So all these small acts, and seeing a young person present, and I've seen this happen at Pres previously, they're all small acts, but it really adds to the totality of the way that the landscape is shifting to, by bringing in those perspectives, and then that helps inspire the next generation. So we just need to keep doing what we're doing, I think, and making sure that we are constantly look for opportunities to bring in new voices, younger voices, and really represent that diversity of our population of young people living with RMDs.
Yes. It's no question, but Marika from GVN in the Netherlands said that she really appreciates all the work you do for the children and the young adults with rheumatic diseases. Michael, do you have some last words for this session?
I think this kind of peer support is hugely important, and I think everyone needs to be working together, not just the families and the patients, but also the hospitals, the doctors, the nurses. I think if we can get everyone talking to each other and supporting each other and working together, I think we're really, we're not there to replace the medical side, but we can support it with lots of lived experience. And I think this is so hugely important, because you start this journey and you get all your medication and your treatments, but then for the rest of it, you're relying on someone else's experience to really supplement all this information, and help you to move forward. So I think if we can open the dialogue in all directions, and get as many as people involved, I think that would be a real benefit.
Thank you so much. Simon, Natasha, Michael, very thank you for your time and for your presentations. We really appreciate it. Much thank you for your answering the questions. We hope to see you again on another time. For now, thank you so much.